The Hermit. An attack on Barbercraft. At last an end of all I hoped and feared, muttered the Hermit through his elfin beard. Then, what art thou? The evil whisper word. I doubt me sorely if the Hermit heard. To all God's questions, never a word he said, but simply shook his venerable head. God sent all plagues. He laughed and heeded not, till people took him for an idiot. God sent all joys. He only laughed again, till people certified him as insane. But somehow all his fellow lunatics began to imitate his silly tricks, and stranger still their prospects so enlarged that one by one the patients were discharged. God asked him by what right he interfered. He only laughed into his elfin beard. When God revealed himself to mortal prayer, he gave a fatal opening to Voltaire. Our Hermit had dispensed with Sinai's slender, but on the other hand, he made no blunder. He knew no doubt that any axiom would furnish bricks to build some donkeydom, but all who urged that Hermit to confess caught the infection of his happiness. I would it were my fate to dree his weird. I think that I will grow an elfin beard. People ask people, that have not hidden away their nature, right? Why do you grow a beard? And you're like, well, when a boy becomes a man, and they're like, no, why? It's like, well, it just happens, right? But we see some references here that could be considered insulting. Of course, Christianity was compared to donkey worship at some point, and there were cults of donkeys. It wasn't as insulting as people might think, you could say. But there is this idea that if the Christian idea of divinity was right, then any of the issues with that open the way for whatever. And wouldn't the issues with that have to do with, well, what happened with humanity? So I was listening to this guy that I've interviewed, and he was talking about that. What was this? I'm going to hell and I love it. That was the name of his video. Okay. So yeah, he talked about this, and he was like, well, God sort of is related to the human, and it's like that concept of God, but I don't think you can say that essence is interpreted through that qualities interpreted through human flaws says something about ultimate causation, when even science tends to indicate that there would be, they can't figure out how the Big Bang would work without an imaginary period, without imaginary time, space, and matter before actual time, space, and matter, and some other things. So, but then again, the Hermit, their myths are all, they realize the myths are about themselves, too, and that, what is Shibli, the great Sufi saint from Baghdad, maybe he's just so sane that he seems insane to the mundane. And so the Disciple, 1913, the Convert, 1910, the Hermit, 1909, and Clouds Without Water is going to be the next one. And that was going to be